You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
All right, welcome back. We are joined by State Senator Jason Barickman. Thank you very much for being here, and congratulations on the budget.
Yeah, good to get that done. As that passed and as it was put together and passed, my reminder to everyone was that this was not an opportunity for us to pat ourselves on the back, right? I don't think that legislators should run around giving themselves, high fives and taking a victory lap. Our job is to put together and pass a balanced budget. On time. I was pleased to see it come together in a bipartisan manner. First time in probably more than a decade. So I was pleased that we got it done as we're supposed to. The list of things that we need to do is endless. So my opinion is time to move on to those next things.
Now, of course, in the immediate aftermath of the budget, we did, of course, talk about being bipartisan and balanced, but these rating agencies, Moody's and Fitch in particular, they are raising some concerns, as I think they always do. They're saying the budget is more of the status quo, and they say there's a hole in the budget, hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're saying it's unbalanced.
So look, the rating agencies evaluate governmental and business decisions like this. So I get it. Just like I said to you earlier, there's a lot more work for us to do. I think the positive aspect of this budget is that it's a budget. It looks forward 12 months. We give it to the governor. His job is to implement it. I think we've all heard from Governor Rauner that he thinks this is a budget that he can manage. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that other tough decisions aren't going to be necessary. I think as some of the budget plays out while it's being implemented, we may be forced to come back to the table, resolve some issues. Again, these are natural things that in a normal year would occur. We don't seem to be living in normal times right now. But I'm not necessarily alarmed by that. I'm simply recognizing that, to my earlier point, it's why you don't take a victory lap. It's doing your job, and part of your job is not to pass the budget and then walk away, say this is someone else's problem. This is our state's problem. The fact that we have a backlog of unpaid bills, the fact that we're not competing with neighboring states for the jobs that we need to grow our economy, that makes passing budgets easier. These are the issues that are out there for which I think we need to turn our attention to.
Democrats say in part passing this budget was a little bit easier because while the governor was involved in more of the leadership meetings, he wasn't as vocal about pushing his turnaround agenda. It was more about, what needs to be done to get this done.
Yeah,
Is that true?
I think everyone, both sides of the aisle, was very reasonable and conducted themselves in a reasonable manner this year. You think about, well, what are the effects of having an election this November? Part of the effect is everyone's accountable. And everyone recognized, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, if you're on the ballot this November and we don't have a budget in place, I think the public revolts on those who are blamed for that. There was a lot of risk to any Republican or Democrat that they get blamed for not having a budget. I think that forced everyone to the table. It forced everyone to act very reasonably and rationally, and it made doing the impossible, or it allowed doing the impossible to get done. Again, nothing, I don't think there's anything incredible about it. It's just the way government is expected to function, and I think this is a year where, although we don't solve all those other problems on the budget, we came together as the public, I think, expected us to.
So you have this budget. You did it in a bipartisan fashion. Last week, I sat down with Tom Demmer and Mike Eunice, and they seemed very optimistic in one sense, and that was this bipartisan aspect, that everybody was kind of able to, for the most part, because there are some people certainly who are never going to vote for a budget because they maybe either don't think it spends enough or they think it always spends too much. But at the end of the day, a lot of people came together and they said this was the right way to do it. Does this set the table going forward for call it harmony in the General Assembly?
Well, you know, it doesn't hurt, right? I mean, just like last year when we came together on school funding reform, you saw a group of legislators who worked through kind of the mess of governance and said, here's a path where we can work together and check something off the list and get something done. I think that happened again this year with the budget. Obviously, the challenge and maybe more so, Paul, the reality of the moment is that we're not going to have a lot of opportunities between now and the end of the year to come together on any agreements to solve problems. We don't have that opportunity because of the way the cycle works, the legislative calendar, the fact that everyone's gearing up for these November elections. They're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these elections. And the question of how do lawmakers on either side of the aisle work together is one that will ultimately be determined next year. It'll be driven by the question of whether you've got, you know, Rauner as a Republican or Pritzker as a Democrat as the head of the executive branch. It's going to be determined some by the makeup of the legislature. You know, where does Mike Madigan fall? There's a lot of noise about, you know, the problems in the Speaker's office. Where is Mike Madigan in all of this? All of those things are going to go into the bucket of how we work together. I'll tell you, you know, in my years in the legislature, I've tried very hard to work with my colleagues across the aisle. Sometimes it's easier than others for that to become a reality, but it's a necessary component of government is for the two sides to figure out how to play nice together in the sandbox and actually accomplish some of the problems, solve some of the problems that are facing our state.
You mentioned the election. Obviously, it is pretty ugly at the top of the ticket between the governor and J.B. Pritzker, and certainly don't expect them to, as you mentioned, play any nicer in the sandbox as it gets closer to November. We don't know how that's going to play out, but one of your colleagues in the Senate, Sam McCann, is obviously in that race, and you had this Janus versus AFSCME decision, which certainly J.B. Pritzker in this race for governor gets a lot of support from unions. Governor Rauner's making no friends in unions with this decision, but Sam McCann does garner some support from unions in his district. Do you see Sam McCann potentially playing a bit of a spoiler role in this election? I mean, how problematic is that for the governor?
Well, it's probably a little too soon to say. Certainly, you know, Sam McCann is going to have an impact on this race. I don't think there's any doubt about that. What is unclear at the moment is whether he's going to have a bigger impact on Pritzker by attracting union votes that maybe would have went to Pritzker that now go to McCann. Or whether he's going to attract more Rauner votes. You know, I think there's a lot of pundits who presume that McCann will generate more support from Rauner. That may be so. I think it's a little too soon to say. You know, when there's an election months away, the prediction game gets very tough because you don't know what's going to happen between now and then. Bottom line is, you know, the fact that you're going to have McCann, you may have another third-party candidate, a libertarian.
Sure.
Those individuals on the ballot are going to have an impact, especially in what many of us believe is going to be a close race. You know, today the polls suggest that Pritzker's got a margin, a lead that is not insignificant, but if you look historically at the governor's race in Illinois, this time of year, traditionally the Democrat is leading the Republican by a healthy margin. Usually that tightens, and I would expect that it's going to tighten. Rauner obviously has more work to do within his own Republican Party to solidify that support, but he also has to keep his eye on the moderates and the independents who are critical for anyone who wants to win a statewide election in Illinois.
How do you expect, just to wrap things up, the election, however it might play out, to impact the legislative calendar for the rest of the year?
Well, I don't think there's going to be much of a legislative calendar for the rest of the year. I think there's going to be a lot of noise. I think this is going to be an election for which the public looks at on election day and says, thank God it's over. You know, when you have that amount of money and the presumed negativity that's going to come from the candidates, I think it's very unfortunate. I think the public's going to be disheartened by what they're hearing. I believe there's an opportunity for Illinoisans who are concerned about the future of our state, the direction of our state. What they really want to hear is what the candidate's vision is for tomorrow. We're all concerned about the communities we live in. We're concerned about our state, whether it's home values, the fact that our neighbors are getting jobs and moving out of state. The candidates have to address these things, and that candidate who instills confidence in the public that they're the one to lead the effort to right our ship, I think that's the candidate that wins. That leader wins the race.
All right, State Senator Jason Barickman, thank you very much for your time. You are watching Central Illinois on the Record. We'll be right back.